All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er update, some Niner news here leading into minicamp after the draft and a number of different things going on around the 49ers, and we'll hit on a few of them right here. But first, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Go say hi to Damon and Mary. Tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. Well, the 49ers will have a rookie minicamp, I believe, later this week. And one of the guys who's going to be invited is a guy who went to my school. I went to Sacramento State, and former Sacramento State tight end Marshall Martin, who was a tryout player at the Jets minicamp last weekend, is going to do the same with the Niners this weekend. He's kind of a small tight end. He's kind of more almost built like a fullback. He's 6'1", 222 pounds. He ran 4.51 in the 40, which is a pretty good time. He had 27 touchdowns in college, 65 catches for 879 yards and 12 touchdowns in 2022. And this is a guy who, he says he can't escape wearing green because he wore green in high school and he wore green at Sac State, and then he wore green with the Jets when he tried out there. But this is an interesting guy. He was all Big Sky for the third consecutive season, just the fourth player in Sac State history to do so. And you're talking about a guy, he wasn't drafted, and he never got to, hear his name called, but he will be in minicamp with the 49ers with a chance to earn a roster spot. So we'll see. We'll see what he looks like this weekend. I'm interested to see, what kind of player he is. He's an interesting player just because he's got great measurables and just he's a little bit short for tight end. So maybe he's a fullback. This is a guy who's had a lot of success in the high school level, had a ton of production at the college level, and it seems to get better every single year. But we're going to find out if he's going to be able to make the 49ers. But he'll be one of multiple guys that I'm sure will be trying out this weekend down in Santa Clara. Now, another story that's out there surrounding the 49ers is the Niners, according to reports, discussed trading Deebo Samuel before making the decision not to move him. Now, when was this? This was 2 hours before day 2 of the draft. So, that was the Friday. And basically, Jeremy Fowler of ESPN is reporting that the day before the trade talks, the Niners, of course, drafted Ricky Pearsall with pick number 31 in the first round. And they apparently decided to keep Samuel, and they were considering moving him. And then, of course, they kept him, and then they drafted another wide receiver in Arizona's Jacob Cowing in the 4th round. And it's interesting. The Athletic's Diana Rossini previously reported that the Niners had talks before the start of the draft about possibly dealing Deebo Samuel or Brandon Aiyuk in hopes of moving up in the first round of the draft. Samuel, of course, was a 2021 All-Pro. He recorded 60 catches for 892 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns in 15 regular season starts. He added 13 catches for 146 yards in 3 playoff games to help the Niners reach Super Bowl 58. He's got 2 seasons remaining on his 3-year extension that he signed with the Niners back in 2022. He's set to cost $28.6 million against their cap for this season. This is the final year of guaranteed money on Deebo's deal. So a lot of people are of the belief that this might be his final year with the 49ers. But that's the report coming out that Jeremy Fowler says, they considered trading Deebo after the first round, and only about 2 hours before round 2 and 3 began on Friday, day 2 of the draft. So roughly 2:00 in the afternoon, they said, you know what? We're not going to trade Deebo. We're going to keep him. Now, most likely what that means is they didn't get the offers they wanted. And, they value him at a higher level than the teams that were wanted to trade for him. And I think the 49ers just looked at it and said, you know what? Let's bite the bullet and keep this guy because he helps us win in the present. We're inside of our Super Bowl window. We're not getting what we want in a trade. Now, the other report that's interesting is, Brandon Aiyuk was a popular name floated in trade rumors leading up to the draft, but it sounds like the asking price for him was fairly steep. ESPN also reporting, this is Jeremy Fowler reported today, that much of the league was keeping a close eye on the 49ers handling of their wide receiver position throughout the draft. However, many teams learned that the Niners wanted a similar deal to what the Titans asked for from the Eagles when they moved A.J. Brown. The quote was, multiple teams told me they had an interest in Brandon Aiyuk, but they believed the 49ers wanted a first-round pick for him, with one comparing the situation to that of A.J. Brown, who went from Tennessee to Philly in 2022. The Eagles, of course, then signed Brown to a 4-year, $100 million contract extension. So, if you wanted to trade for Aiyuk, you had to satisfy the Niners. It sounded like they wanted a mid-first round pick. And then you had to satisfy Aiyuk, in a contract. And I think there were a lot of moving parts there. And there's a deal that really just had a hard time coming together. Now Aiyuk is entering the final year of his contract. He's set to make this year $14.1 million for the upcoming season. And, he's made it perfectly clear he wants a new contract. It doesn't sound like there's been a lot of progress on that front. The Niners clearly probably don't value him at the same level that his agent does. John Lynch told the media last month that the team's wish is for Aiyuk to be here for the rest of his career, and we'll see. We'll see. He could play out the 2024 season and test the open market next off season. I don't think the Niners want to do that. I think they'd rather get an extension done so it's not a distraction, so it's not this subplot to their season as the year goes on. But I think that's kind of what's going on there with Brandon Aiyuk. He's not signed. He still wants a deal, and we'll see if he gets one. That it's as simple as that. I mean, he is a terrific wide receiver and one that is worth a big time contract extension. The other note that I thought was interesting, there was a great article out today on Bleacher Report about Ricky Pearsall, and there's a guy who puts together prospect rankings for wide receivers and has between 2021 and 2024. And he's got Ricky Pearsall in that window, 2021 to 2024, ranking 18th on his list as far as just, value. And there's guys like Marvin Harrison and Jamar Chase, Rome Odunze, Chris Olave, Devontae Smith, Garrett Wilson, Malik Neighbors, Jalen Waddle. But it's interesting, if you take out all the other years and just put Pearsall against the wide receivers in this draft, they rank him 6th overall, and the 5 receivers ahead of him are Harrison Jr., Odunze, Neighbors, Jermaine Burton from Alabama, and Brian Thomas. All those guys went in front of Pearsall except Burton. Burton was selected after. And Pearsall was ranked higher than Xavier Worthy on this list. So, it's interesting the way they went through this. They went through this and kind of evaluated Pearsall as far as different routes and how he plays in different situations. And we'll see. We'll see. Time's going to tell. A lot of people feel, Jeremy Fowler said that he felt Pearsall's pick in the first round was one of the big head scratchers of the entire draft. He had a quote saying most teams I spoke to had him pegged as a day 2 pick. The Niners, he thought they would go offensive or defensive line, and obviously they went wide receiver. And so it's interesting. A lot of people feel like Pearsall can be a number 2 or number 3 receiver. And one of the quotes here from a NFC personnel evaluator, he says he can be a nice number 2 or number 3 receiver, a good player, but that was a bit of a reach in my opinion. And an AFC executive acknowledged that the appeal of Pearsall was that he was kind of like Puka Nacua. He said they wanted a route runner like the Rams have in Puka, probably see him in that same role. So that's kind of interesting that that the 49ers, viewed Pearsall as maybe their version of Puka. And I talked about this last week. The NFL is the ultimate copycat league. If whatever you did last year, if it worked, everybody's looking for that this year. So last year, Puka Nacua goes late. A bunch of people miss on him. He's not this impressive route runner, but he's just got great hands, and he'll run these little stop routes and these little short underneath stuff. And it became borderline unstoppable and really, really difficult to defend. And he piled up all kinds of catches. And I'm sure the Niners look at Pearsall and Purdy and say, hey, we can probably rekindle some of that as well. But talking a little bit about these rankings, so it's interesting. Yahoo has a sports analyst named Matt Harmon, and he grades out wide receivers, and he gives data on the percentages of routes run, the success rate on routes run, the percentage of routes run against man, against zone, the success rate against all coverages. And Pearsall is interesting. He holds a lead in success rate against all coverages. And really he graded out better than Xavier Worthy, who a lot of Niner fans wanted to see come to the Niners. He, of course, went to the Chiefs. Chiefs traded up and took Xavier Worthy, and we'll see how it works out. But Worthy lined up in the slot 36.1% of the time. Pearsall lined up in the slot 51.4% of the time. And if you look at some of the numbers, Pearsall had a 67.7% success rate against press. And that's about average according to the reception perception model. But then Pearsall exceeds Brian Thomas Jr., Jermaine Burton, Ladd McConkey against man coverage. Against zone coverage, he ran more of his routes and had a higher success rate than Thomas and Burton. Facing press coverage, Pearsall was third behind Burton and Brian Thomas Jr., but holds a wide margin on McConkey. Double coverage, obviously never leads to a lot of success, period. But McConkey and Pearsall tied at 57.1%. Burton was right behind them at 50%. Brian Thomas Jr. well behind them at 28.6%. So just to give you an idea, here are the basic raw numbers on Pearsall. Versus man-to-man coverage, 44.1% of his routes were against man coverage, and he had a 75.8% success rate. And then against zone coverage, 55.9% of his routes were against zone, and he had an 82.2% success rate. So still, I mean, people said, well, he really struggled against man coverage. 75.8% success rate, almost 76%. Now against press, he only ran 11% of his routes against press coverage. He had a 67.7% success rate. And against double coverage, he was doubled only 5% of his routes, and he had a 57.1 success rate. So as you see there, Pearsall had good success against man, zone, press. You know, he really had good numbers and good success rate against all of those different coverages. So just an interesting thing. It's a good article. If you get a chance to check that out on Yahoo, check that out. It kind of illustrates that Pearsall may be a little bit more of a well-rounded receiver than people kind of build him as. He was billed on draft day as, he can beat zone, but he can't beat man, and he can't beat press at the line. The numbers kind of say otherwise. The schedule is going to be released later this week, and we're thinking maybe today, maybe tomorrow. And to me, one of the things that I think 49er fans ought to look at with the schedule, look at the Niners' non-division road games. They play Green Bay at Lambeau. They play Minnesota in the Dome. They play the Dolphins in South Florida. They play the Bills up in Buffalo, and they play Tampa in Tampa. Well, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to see that the Niners' schedule could be a whole lot easier or tougher based on when do they get the Florida teams and when do they get the cold weather teams. Like, you'd much rather play Green Bay in September than Green Bay in December when you got to go to Lambeau and it's freezing cold and the conditions. It becomes a much more difficult task. Same with Buffalo. You'd much rather play Buffalo in September or October than go in there after Thanksgiving with snow on the ground and try to deal with those conditions. So that's one thing to look for. The other thing is the Florida teams, and it's not really talked about that much, but the Florida teams, whether it be Miami, Tampa, Jacksonville, they all have a decided advantage in September in that ridiculously humid, sticky weather. So if the Niners wind up getting Tampa and Miami in September and, Buffalo and Green Bay in December, it could be that could make for a very difficult schedule. Now, if it's reversed and the Niners get Buffalo and Green Bay before the cold weather sets in, or they get Tampa or Miami maybe after Thanksgiving, when heck, those are much better places to play. That could be a very favorable schedule for the 49ers. So I think that's one factor. A lot of talk about maybe the Niners will play in London against Minnesota. We'll see about that. There's a lot of people that believe there's a chance for that. I know the Niners are enormously popular in London, and it would be a decidedly Niner crowd, whether it was their home game or not. If it's the Vikings game, that would be a Vikings home game. And that would be another advantage for the 49ers if it's in London, because it's going to be like a 90% Niner crowd on a Viking home game in London. So those are kind of the two or three of the factors to look for in the schedule release. When do the Niners get Tampa? When do they get Miami? Hopefully it's late in the year. When do they get Buffalo? When do they get Green Bay? Hopefully it's early in the year. And if they do wind up playing the Vikings in London, that goes from one of their more difficult road games. They've always had a hard time winning in Minnesota, to kind of what they had in Arizona against Arizona a few years ago in Mexico City, where they played them in front of a crowd that was 90% Niner fans, but it was the Cardinals, listed as the Cardinal home game. So some of the things to look for as far as the schedule release is concerned. And last but not least, our buddy Kyle Madsen, who writes for Niners Wire, has a really interesting article out. And one of the main factors, I think, there's a lot of factors as far as what kind of years it's going to be for the Niners. What are they getting out of their rookie class? How much better can Brock Purdy be? What kind of years Aiyuk going to have? What kind of years Deebo going to have? Deebo could be in his final year with the Niners. Can the Niners run it back? Is there a residual impact of playing all these playoff games the last couple of years? The Super Bowl loser oftentimes struggles the next year. But one of the factors that Madsen highlights here, and I think it's a great thing to highlight, is that there is this huge question mark that really surrounds the 49ers. And it's really about their 2022 draft. And, it's kind of like, what would you give their grade for the 2022 draft? I would give it an incomplete, because we don't know about 5 real key guys. And these 5 guys are going to be, worth watching. I guess these 6 guys, I should say, are going to be worth watching this year, and really could make or break the year. If you told me that these 6 players that haven't proven themselves out of the 2022 draft are all going to be busts, then it's, the Niners challenge becomes that much greater to make the playoffs and make a run. If you're going to tell me that some of these 2022 draft choices that haven't fulfilled potential to this point are going to fulfill potential, and each one of them you could make an argument pro or con that they will or won't, then the year looks much more, the roster, I should say, looks much deeper and much better. So let's go through these 6 guys. The first one is Drake Jackson. And Drake Jackson had 3 sacks in week 1 against the Steelers. And then, the Niners badly need help coming off the edge. And if he can break through this year and get that strength and turn the corner as a pro and be a regular contributor and maybe somewhat of an impactful contributor up front, that's going to make the Niners pass rush that much better. He had 3 sacks last year. Then he, basically got hurt and he had to shut it down. His season was done. Drake has been very disappointing. He's a great dude, and I love talking to him. But the truth is that he's been disappointing, and I don't know if he has enough strength. I don't know if he has enough moves. I know the urgency's there. This is kind of a make or break year for all 6 of these guys, and Drake's at the top of the list. If he busts out and has a real good year, that's going to bode well for the Niners' chances. Another guy's Danny Gray. Danny Gray was supposed to break out last season. Instead, he hurt his shoulder in the preseason, spent the entire season on the IR. And, he's got 1 catch for 10 yards as a pro. They drafted this guy in the 3rd round out of SMU. He's got 4.3 speed. And if you watch him play, and no Niner fans have except for practice. If you watched him in college, he might even play more like a 4-2 guy. I mean, he's really, really, really fast and really, really, really impactful. But they just drafted Ricky Pearsall, and they just drafted Jacob Cowing, and this guy might be out of a gig. Now, if he shows up in camp ready to roll and playing outstanding football, they become more dynamic. And suddenly the roster gets more competitive, and maybe they even wind up making a trade at wide receiver. So Danny Gray's a lot of people have already given him up for dead. I have not. But it's got to happen, and it's got to happen this year. It's go time for all these guys, but most notably Danny Gray. He hasn't done anything, but he's got the tools to do a ton. Another guy who's got a make or break year, Spencer Burford, 4th-round pick out of University of Texas at San Antonio. As a rookie, he saw a lot of time. Last year, he regressed, and he had a terrible, missed block in the Super Bowl, which obviously doesn't help his cause. But this guy is smart. He's physically the prototype, and I don't see any reason why he should not be able to evolve into a starting guard in the NFL. He's got the arm length. He's got the body type. He's got the brains. He's got the motivation. He's got a really good coach in Chris Forster. So it's do or die time for Spencer Burford. Is he a starter in the NFL? I mean, if he can't become a starter this year, he's probably going to be a career backup. So this camp is defining for Spencer Burford. So we got Drake Jackson, Danny Gray, Spencer Burford. That's their round 2, their round 3, and their round 4 pick. Are they getting nothing out of those guys, or are those guys going to rise up? Here's another one, and this one's probably the most interesting to me. Samuel Womack III. What a weird career this guy's had. I mean, he won the starting nickel cornerback job out of camp as a rookie. Then he lost that job in week 3. But then, he was one of their top reserves. Last year, he began the year as a reserve after having a phenomenal training camp. He looked as good in training camp as Diamador Lenore did. And yet he wound up missing time due to injury. He finished the year as a healthy scratch in all 3 playoff games. And I talked to him late in the year, and it was like, he kind of knew. It's like, these guys don't believe in me. I'm not getting off the pine. I'm not getting a shot. So now you got a new defensive czar. You got a new defensive coordinator in Sorensen. You got a new defensive, contributor, let's say, in Brandon Staley. And Womack's got, he's not big, but he's got great speed, and he's a good coverage player. He's had some really good coverage plays where they've just still found a way to complete the pass against him, and you're sitting there going, well, he's right there. I mean, he's mirroring the receiver up and down the field. So I guarantee you this. If the Niners can't figure out a way to get Samuel Womack to play the kind of football they want, they're probably going to move on, and he is going to go somewhere else, and he's going to succeed because he's got the measurables, he's got the speed, he's got the mentality, he's got everything it takes. It just has not happened yet for Samuel Womack III. So he's another guy. Let's get on to the next guy, Nick Zakelj. Nick Zakelj went to Fordham. And we knew there was going to be a learning curve because he was trying to transition from, he played offensive tackle at Fordham. Fordham is a much lower level than the NFL. He's trying to transition to guard. He's Brock Purdy's roommate. On paper, this guy's an awesome prospect. He's smart. He's tough. He's competitive. He wants it, and it has not happened. And this guy never gets on the field. He was a 6th-round pick from Fordham, so maybe he doesn't have much of a career. But I'll tell you, I love him as a prospect. Why? Because for all the reasons I just said. He's smart. He's tough. He's 6'6", long arms, and offensive linemen sometimes take a little while to adjust. Now, he's got a great coach in Forster. He's obviously got a great ally in Purdy. If he's got to establish himself, not necessarily as a starter this summer, but he's got to establish himself at least as a quality backup, or, he's probably cut. So this is a huge camp for Nick Zakelj. And, I think Zakelj's got a lot of potential. He wants to get better. He's smart, tough, long-armed, small school tackle who's taken a year plus to adjust. But, he should show up in camp with some urgency. And then the last guy is Kalia Davis. Kalia Davis started as a middle backer. He was 245 pounds. Then he was 250. Then he was 260. Then he was 270. He's now 295. And he's got a lot of speed. And the Niners have openings and availability there on the interior of their defensive line. If this guy shows up rushing the passer and playing with his hair on fire, he'll make the team and he'll be in that rotation and he'll get run on game day. But he's had knee problems. He hasn't been able to get on the field. He's got a lot of talent, a lot of speed, and a lot of explosiveness in a real compact frame. And he was a very productive player at Central Florida. So I really am a big fan of really all these guys: Kalia, Zakelj, Womack, Burford, Gray, and Jackson. So you got 6 guys there. This is basically the entire 2022 draft. Is that draft a nightmare and these guys are all busts? So in some people's minds, every one of these guys has already proven that they're a bust. I disagree with that. I would say that every single one of these guys still has good football ahead. And I'm encouraged that all of them are going to show up. But to me, this is one of the subplots to this season. If the Niners wind up getting 0 out of that 2022 draft and all these guys are busts and Drake and Gray and Burford and Womack and Zakelj and Kalia Davis, these guys are all cut at the cut down at the end of the preseason, that's going to be a very, very bad omen. But if on the flip side, if Kalia Davis suddenly gives you interior pass rush, if Nick Zakelj shows that he can be a quality backup, if Samuel Womack shows that he can be a starter at the corner, if Burford emerges this year as a player at guard, if Danny Gray, shows that he's over his injuries and he's going to get on the field and actually make an impact and take the top off the defense and create all that space, if Drake Jackson gets stronger and shows that he's got something, then that 2022 draft could wind up being a strength, and it could fuel the 49ers right into another run for a Lombardi Trophy back into the Super Bowl this year in New Orleans. So to me, if there's one factor, you're always looking at the stars, and you're always looking at the new additions this year, and there were a bunch, both in the draft and free agency. But if there's one factor that could swing the Niners from, they're a good football team, one of 6 or 7, one of 6 or 7 of the best teams in the NFC. If these guys all wind up being busts, they may fall behind Green Bay and Detroit and Philly. If these guys, if 5 or 6 of these guys wind up, really fulfilling their potential, they may kind of take their spot as the number 1 team in the NFC and hold that spot and hold off Detroit and Green Bay and Philly. So a lot of these guys are depth pieces. They're, but they all really have the potential. Jackson has the potential to start. Burford's got the potential to start. Womack's got the potential to start. How those 6 guys do from the 2022 draft is going to define in some ways what this season and what this Niner team looks like. All right. We are brought to you by Pig and a Pickle. Check them out, as I said, in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week. And this video is brought to you by our newest sponsor, Aura. And now a word from Aura. Have you ever typed your name on the internet and seen all of your private information is online? Are you tired of receiving tons of spam calls from random numbers? Are you receiving more and more of these as time has gone on? Well, that's where Aura, the sponsor of today's show, can really help you out. Data brokers sell your information to scammers and spammers and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, your email, your home address, all your records, your health records, who your relatives are. It's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it also protects me from hackers who could use the information to help them access my social media accounts, my bank accounts, or any other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats I can't see. I get other features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without having to download several different apps. It's really easy to set up. And best of all, I get everything at one affordable price. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to the link in the description to start your 2-week free trial. And thanks to Aura for sponsoring this video. And thanks to all of you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.